Hi, this is Anurag, and today we are going to compare the two very famous softwares, Blender and 3ds Max. So, starting with the topics that we will cover are ability, interface, feature set, utility, advancement in both the softwares, usability, learning curve, and finally the conclusion. So, starting with the abilities, most people say that Blender and 3ds Max have the same abilities, but they do not. Blender has a far greater ability than 3ds Max, because 3ds Max is just concentrated over modeling, animation, and the core production. But Blender can do pretty much everything you want in a production software. So Blender can do modeling, sculpting, it can also perform composition, it has a very friendly node system, it can do video editing as well, it has a very powerful simulation engine, it can do rendering with the best kind of renderer, that is cycles, it has a real time rendering engine, that is EV, and it has the most powerful viewport in the world. Among all the 3D software, Blender has the most powerful viewport which can do multiple things, and Blender seems to be gaining a point over here over 3ds Max. Next, coming to the interface. So here is a comparison of the interface of Blender and 3ds Max. You can see 3ds Max is very clean and it's not really organized. It's clean, but it can cause problems while you want to increase your workflow, so it doesn't really help you much. So the interface of 3ds Max is not really a very good one, whereas you can see Blender is not very clean, but it has a very good interface. Like I told, it has the most powerful viewport. It is just because of its interface. It is very organized, and it has, like, the utility of the interface is the best. So you can see properties panel, which is, I think it's the most important thing that you need to have on the viewport, but whereas 3ds Max doesn't seem to be having anything like that. It just have a modifier panel, whereas Blender has an outliner in the interface, in the viewport, but I don't see any outline over here. Blender has a few more options, like it has the animation editor, and it has workspaces. Workspaces are not really supported in 3ds Max, but Blender has it because it has to manage all its features. So to make one feature being concentrated on the viewport, it has to make several workspaces. So like you can concentrate over modeling, so you can switch on to modeling workspace. Whereas if you want to concentrate over one thing, you have to just simply switch the layout of the whole viewport in 3ds Max, so it doesn't really help you. Here we have 3ds Max and their features. So the main features that are there on the front page are texturing, modeling, and other next animation and effects. They feature their rendering and a few more features that they have developed over the 20 years of their existence. So they boast of their some of the cool things that they feature, like smart extrude, new weighted normals modifier, new baking to texture, material texture and color editor, automated topology and mesh repair, mesh and surface modeling, and spline workflows, open shading language support, comfort modifier. Okay, and they have max fluid, animation rigging tools, animation tools for generals, motion paths, particle flow effects, new plugins, brilliant viewport. I don't think so. Arnold for 3ds Max, active shade viewport. That's very laggy. So physical camera, 3dx Max, batch scene converter, and they have a few more things that they've developed. Now going to the next is we have the freedom to create. That's their tagline. Okay, so the first thing it boasts of is, and it's pretty proud upon, is Cycles render engine. It is a pretty good render engine about on which we will talk later. And then comes modeling, sculpting, UV. It has a lot of features. Now we can see it has all-rounder scene over here. It has used every possible tool set that's there with Blender over here. It is pretty good. And the next which we can see is VFX. So if you see VFX, it is showing the motion tracking, compositing, editing with the timeline, and it's pretty good. Animation and rigging. So this is clear that why it boasts it off in animation, because Blender is the second best software for animation in the market after Maya. I would make a comparison between Blender and Maya for the next time. Yeah, it has story art 2D and 3D in 3D. So this is one of the things where Blender is really very powerful at. So this is 2D art and it's created with grease pencil, the only tool that you need to create this 2D art. And then we have next, make it your own, means whenever you download Blender, it's all yours. Now you will be thinking that it's the end, but it's not. It has a few more features, and if I go with that, it has what new page and the new features that it has. And this is where comes on both on its geometry nodes, and that has a lot of power. Coming on to the next, attribute proximity. Yeah, it's the attribute proximity. So it looks like this, seems to be pretty cool. Sample texture, I mean, that's also looks pretty good. Volume to mesh. Okay, not so primitive. Okay, next, plus these nodes, procedural. Yeah, it's all procedural. Pretty good. Improved user experience. So it has to do a lot than 3ds Max. Happy accidents. So if any error happens, it will notify you there on the node. It's if it's related to that node. Meet the best friend. So you have the Spreadsheet Editor, and you can see the attributes over it of the exact value. And then at the end, we have the new sculpting features. So as you can see, it has mask loops and patterns, mask textures. This is seeming pretty cool, and this is something which Autodesk 3D Max will never be able to do. Flexible face sets. This is something that I liked about the grab feature, and this is very good. Mask out of the box. It is like weight, kind of, it extrudes things with their weight. And then switch up Splitting complex figures into multiple objects is a quick way to significantly improve performance. In order to ease this workflow, there is a new way to quickly jump between objects while in sculpt mode. So they are more productive now. Hold in line art, and this is going to be changing everything that people were dependent upon Photoshop. Now you can create pretty cool amazing blueprints with Blender with a pretty precise and accurate uh, structure. It will be on you. So next, interpolating. This is with a grease pencil. Yeah, and it's very good. I might really use a grease pencil much because I'm not a 2D artist. Yeah, and more on Eevee. They have a lot of updates. So you can see over here, it's no big difference, but here you can see the back. The back side was like it was having a lot of kind of. You can see the noise that comes, the separation of the colors. And then next Eevee influences. I mean, you can light is now being influenced. Light influences Eevee. So you have the effect of light with Eevee now. So if any light is there, it will not just blindly make a shadow of it. It will think about, and it is like really faking the ray trace, but still it's giving a very nice value. Coming to the next is depth of field. So here you can see out of the picture things coming in contrast, but now they are no more. They are really out of the picture now. And volume plus shadows. Earlier it was terrible and now it's perfect. And but wait, there's more. It looks like their advertisement. Yeah, looking sharp. Wow. Nicer subsurface scattering. They have much better. They have got mastery, and now they can render much faster. Actually, you can render less, but you can see more. So the denoiser is more precise now, and it can do pretty good and accurate work. So more cycles. You have open color 2.0, new fast gear approximation panel settings, access to geometry node attributes. Hold on to this, and you might be thinking that this is the end, but it's not. The release notes. This is a 2.9 series. I would just like to okay, let's go to that page with the downloads page. You can see Blender experimental. This is a very cool feature in it. So when we jump into the page, you can see 4 Blender versions: 2.83.91, 2.93.6, 3.0.0, 3.1.0. And the first one is candidate, and that's the long-term support. Then it's 2.93.6, the candidate one. It's also long-term support, but now it is a stable release. And then comes the Blender 3.0 beta, and that is something that has changed everything. That is the biggest release of this year. And 3.1 going to carry out this. There is really very much hope with this, and let's dive into the latest changes. So the latest changes have both 3.1 alpha and 3.0 beta changes as well. So we are going to see the 3.0 beta changes because they are the major ones, and 3.0 alpha is just having small changes. They are very very small. So we have animation rigging, asset browser core. Asset browser is something new that is newly introduced in Blender code through EVN viewport, reference modeling, new physics pipeline access, and I, IO or Python API and text editor rendering cycles. You can read everything on this page. But this was like, you can see that the viewport shows that how you can utilize the viewport for everything you want, but you cannot utilize the viewport in 3ds Max for everything. You have to switch on to different layouts, and switching on to a different layout is a very time consuming thing. Also, the best thing that these two softwares show that through 3ds Max has a very it has a very huge set of bugs with it, whereas Blender seems to be showing very less bugs. Blender's almost bug free. You can't really point any bug out of Blender with its the first hand. So, and that shows how clean is Blender, and the cleanliness of Blender is shown in the source code. The source code, the size of it is very small, as because it is very clean, whereas 3ds Max just come for 8 gigabytes, so it is not a very clean software. And then next, coming to advancements in both softwares. So things which are seen the most in both the softwares is the rendering capabilities, the tool sets, and so many things there. So I'm going to explain it one by one. So coming on with the rendering, here is a comparison between all rendering engines from blenderguru.com. The first image that you can see was rendered in Arnold, and the second is in Cycles. Cycles seems to be much better than Arnold, and it has a greater performance even. Cycles is almost 4 times faster than Arnold, because Arnold will take almost 9 minutes to render one image, and Cycles would take it almost 2 to 3 minutes. And you can decrease the time even further by using denoiser and a much lower sample and much lower samples. And you can also compare Cycles to the best render engine that is available in 3D softwares, that is V-Ray. V-Ray and Cycles stand to be looking similar. You can see Octane, Redshift, and eCycles, V-Ray all are similar, as they have much more accuracy, whereas you can compare Arnold is the worst among it, followed by LuxCore and Corona. So they are not really very good. Next, coming to the next picture, we will compare a different one. This is Subsurface Scattering. So you can see the Subsurface Scattering is really not very good in Arnold. Cycles and V-Ray match, and Corona is, I think, Subsurface Scattering is the best in Corona rendering. eCycles and Cycles are very similar. LuxCore is similar to Octane, where Octane seems to be very much equal to Arnold, and LuxCore is little bit better than them. So I think here Corona render will be the best if you want to use it with any of the software, but Cycles seem to be giving a better performance here than Arnold. Coming to the next picture, here is a example of volumetrics. So volumetrics is very bad in Arnold. You can directly see that the worst volumetrics are shown in Arnold, followed by a Redshift, and then LuxCore. So And you can compare Cycles and V-Ray, they are almost the same. Corona, Octane and E-Cycles are really similar to those. Next, coming to the next picture, we have an all-rounder comparison from Blender Guru as well. So here actually we see that Cycles has a kind of um, it shows a disadvantage over Cycles. So Cycles is not really very good in global illumination. So global illumination is a little bit better than in Arnold. The global illumination is little bit better than Cycles, but you can tweak the values to get you can fake the values and you can get a similar picture in Cycles as well. So here I think Arnold is better than Cycles in global illumination, whereas the shadows are more perfect in Cycles. You can see the reflection is more accurate. The the glass, the refractions also seem to be more accurate in Cycles, and you can see it. The Cycles is way more accurate than Arnold, whereas Arnold seem to be having good global illumination feature, whereas V-Ray is also having a very good global illumination feature, which doesn't match Cycles really. E-Cycles is similar to Cycles. So here we can see a difference between V-Ray and Cycles. So that is why V-Ray is considered as the industry standard for rendering. But Cycles is also a very good renderer, and it seems that Cycles is really good and it's way better than Arnold, where Arnold was just able to compete with one feature. Next, coming to our next, here is a comparison between Cycles and Arnold's that was made by my team, and this shows that Cycle is sometimes better in lighting rather than global illumination, and Arnold seems to be very bad in lighting. And this shows the all-round performance of Cycles and Arnold, where Cycles seem to be having true reflections, true refractions, and the bounces are pretty good for light paths. And whereas Arnold seems to be faking everything, it seems like we are seeing a rasterized render, and it is not giving us a good quality for rendering. And moving on to the next, we have the tool set. So the tool set, I would say, is pretty much very similar in both software, but Blender has a far potential that can grow far better than 3ds Max, that is the geometry nodes. Geometry nodes can take Blender to a greater extent. Geometry nodes are, you can simulate every kind of geometry with geometry nodes. So toolset can be better in Blender, so we have to wait for the next updates that come, and you can find geometry nodes to really make Blender's toolset better than 3ds Max, because the modifiers and the um, editors and tools are really similar in both softwares. Next, coming to usability, Blender has a greater usability than 3ds Max, because you can use it for many things, and all the things Blender has a mastery on. And one feature that I didn't spoke about that Blender is very good in is texturing. Blender is very good in texturing, so though it is not the best in texturing, but it's way better than 3ds Max in texturing. Blender is also very good in sculpting. So the core production can be better in Blender than 3ds Max if you want just the core production. So usability is better in Blender. Next, coming to the learning curve. So after discussing all these features, the learning curve is clear that in Blender you can get a good learning curve. An overview, Blender has the best learning curve. Now coming to the conclusion after this whole thing is, you should use Blender over 3ds Max. Yes, 3ds Max has its own advancements in things, but I would say that you should use Blender over 3ds Max. Blender is way better and has a greater potential than 3ds Max. May 3ds Max come with a major update in future, but where Blender has seen a very big growth in everything, Blender has been the best among all, and I think 3ds Max cannot compete with Blender to be better than it. Suggest you use Blender over 3ds Max. Yes, you can use 3ds Max and Blender both together because some features are very good in 3ds Max. Like you can simulate things at a much greater extent in 3ds Max. You have better animation features. So if you want to have these features, you can use 3ds Max with Blender. So using both the softwares would be great, but if you want to say that which one would be better, I will say that Blender would be better for you. Thank you, and we will meet in the next video where I will compare Blender and Cinema 4D. So let's meet in the next video.